3. Good afternoon. Here I am today in London, which is the capital city of the country we live in, and the country we live in is what's called a HIC or a HIC. That means it's a high income country. Today we're in a part of London which is called Ealing. Ealing is in West London, and the whole of London would be called a megalopolis. A megalopolis means it's a collection of towns that make up a very large city. The population of London is currently around 9 million. Now 9 million is 1 million of what we would call a megacity. A megacity has 10 million people who live in it, and at the moment we're estimating that in about 20 years London will become a megacity, and therefore the population will be 10 million. Across the whole world there are 33 megacities, or there were in 2018, so there may be some more now. Some examples of megacities: the biggest one is Tokyo in Japan. In Japan and in Tokyo they have 38 million people in the city. Now that's about half the population of the whole of the United Kingdom in one city, so you can imagine how busy that would be. Delhi in India is another example. Shanghai in China is another one. You've got New York in the USA. Paris has a population of about 11 million. And Mumbai is going to be one of your case studies. So Mumbai is quite an important one. That's located in India and has a population of 20 million people. So why have you got all these people living in cities? Where do they all come from? Well, this is all to do with something called urbanisation, which means that people are moving to cities. So the word urbanisation means people migrating into urban areas from rural areas, so from the countryside to the city. And the reason they do that is to do with something called push factors and pull factors. So a push factor is something that pushes you out of one area, and a pull factor attracts you to another area. So for an example here, if you look around, then what you can see is already just in this area lots and lots of different job opportunities. So you've got different restaurants, you've got a bank nearby, you've got a restaurant which I've just been in, and all of those provide loads of different types of jobs, and those jobs tend to be better paid in the city as well. You might have other things like lawyers, like people who work in computer research and design and things like that. Lots of jobs like that in a city like London. That would be an example of a pull factor. A push factor would be something negative about where you come from. For example, where you live, in Watton or in that area, that's a rural area, and you may find there aren't very many jobs there, or they're not very well paid jobs, so therefore people might move to the city. Another example in this area is entertainment and shops. So you get lots of young people that want to move to urban areas like London because it's good fun and there's lots of things to do. And once again, as you've just seen around this area, there are loads of different places you can go out to eat. Okay, there's pubs, restaurants, theatres and things like that. And you never know, you could end up doing this yourself. You could be somebody who urbanises. You might end up living in Norwich, or maybe living in Cambridge, or maybe even moving to London. Now, there are different rates of urbanisation. What that means is people are moving to the city at different rates in different types of countries. So in LICs, which stands for a low-income country, lots and lots of people are urbanising. The rate of growth is much higher than in a HIC, which is here. However, in a HIC, a high-income country like the United Kingdom, people are still moving to the cities. So urbanisation is still happening, but at a slower speed than in LICs. And just have a little think for a minute about why that might be. So why do you think more people move to the city in LICs than in HICs? So the first reason for that is during the Industrial Revolution, urbanisation has already happened here. So during the Industrial Revolution there were lots and lots of factories built in the cities, and lots of people moved to London at that time. So therefore there aren't as many people living in the countryside to move to the city because they already have moved here. Whereas in LICs, in poor countries, you've got lots of people in the primary sector farming, and you've got huge numbers of people in the countryside to move to the cities still. Another reason would be something called counter-urbanisation. Counter-urbanisation is the opposite to urbanisation. It's when people move back out of the cities to the countryside. I'd be a good example of someone who had counter-urbanisation. So in Ealing, I used to live here about 18 years ago. I lived here for a year, and I lived in other areas of London for a few years after that as well. But then my husband and I decided that we would move out to a quieter place, and we moved back out to where we live now, which is in Norfolk. More and more people are doing that, so that counts against all the people that are moving to the city. So therefore the rate of people moving to the city is lower because some people are moving back out to the countryside. Another reason would be to do with commuting. Commuting is when you travel to work. So because we have really good roads, because we have good public transport, because we have trains and things like that, it's a lot easier for people to get to the city to work. Therefore they don't need to live in the city because they can drive there or they can get the train there. So they can live in a rural area and get to the city. In a poorer country, you wouldn't be able to do that. And the final reason why there's more urbanisation in poor countries is because of the quality of life of people in the rural areas. Mumbai will be a case study that we look at. Now Mumbai is not an LIC, it's an NEE. That's a newly emerging economy, but it's still quite poor. And in some of the rural areas around Mumbai, it is incredibly poor. Most of the people are farmers in those areas, there's droughts there, and lives are desperate. And therefore people really have no choice. If they want any quality of life, they have to move to the city, even though the city itself may not also be very nice. So, finally, what issues do you have in megacities? What problems do you have? Well, if you look around this area here, one of the issues is the population density. Population density is the number of people living in 1 square kilometre. In other words, how crowded is it? And in places like this, it's crowded. You can see lots of people walking past, you can see lots of homes above the shops. Those houses are small and they're very expensive to buy as well. Another issue you have is pollution and noise. So standing here, you can hear the traffic noise going past and it is polluted. You can't see that, but I'm telling you that because it smells quite polluted in this area as well. Then if you look at poorer countries, if you look at somewhere like Mumbai, it's even worse. So an issue in Mumbai would be extreme pollution. And then you would also have real problems with housing. With so many people moving to cities in poor countries, you end up with people living in slums. And those slums are small houses, often built by the people, crowded together without access to clean water and basic amenities. So those are some of the problems faced by people living in megacities.